Hey, Internet. So, I had an interesting thought the other day. Like, what is a story? And, like, we all tell stories, right? It's very human of us to tell stories, but, like, what actually is a story? And I don't want to use a dictionary. I want to just come up with my own definition because that's way more fun. So I started thinking, like, well, I guess a story is just kind of like a collection of thoughts and ideas. Maybe they convey a message, right? And then because of how this old noggin works, I was thinking more and more about that. And then thinking about language, I love language. And then I was like, well, what is a language? And I was like, well, a language is like a collection of like sounds that convey thoughts, ideas, and a message. Kind of like a story. And so I kind of started thinking, I was like, well, then maybe every language tells a story. Let me explain. So what do I mean by every language tells a story? Well, for me, in my experience with learning language, it's that the language tells the story of the people who speak it, right? From the different vowel sounds it uses, the flow or melody of the language. There's a lot to unpack there. So let me give you a good example with one of my favorite languages, Brazilian Portuguese. So in the Portuguese speaking world, there's kind of two major dialects or branches of the language. You have continental Portuguese, which is what they speak in Portugal, and then Brazilian Portuguese, which of course they speak in Brazil. And there's other Brazilian speaking countries out there. Feel free to check it out because it's like such a cool language. But I want to kind of focus on Brazilian Portuguese. One thing that's really interesting about it is that it's a very vowel heavy language, and so there's lots of open sounds, and it gives the language a warmer feel. It gives the language a more open feel, and I think that's very reflective of the Brazilian people. In my experience, Brazilian people tend to be very open and warm and caring, and even the melody of the language, like how you speak it, it's almost a relaxed tone. And I think that's also reflective of Brazilian people. And again, we're speaking in generalizations here. Maybe your experience is different. And Brazilians who are watching this video, o que vocês acham? What do you guys think? Tell me in the comments below. So why am I saying all this? Well, for me, I think story, again, is something very innately human. And I think that when we study language, we inevitably study culture. And language is the way that we tell the story of a culture, right? Of course, culture in itself could be maybe arguably its own story. But I think language is how we really connect and understand that culture. And one of the beautiful things about studying language is, of course, you become more and more attached to the culture behind that language. And to me, it's interesting how language reflects that culture. I also really think it's good to open our minds a little bit and understand how other cultures work, how they think and they function. And all of that processing is done with the language. Just up here in the old noggin again. And to me, it's such a gift and a blessing to be able to connect to those cultures and see what lessons I can learn from them. To go back to my previous example with Brazilian Portuguese, a lot of my Brazilian friends have kind of shown me how important it is to be connected to family, right? Connected to people, to friends, right? And family doesn't necessarily mean blood. Family can mean like your closest friends, maybe cousins or aunts and uncles, maybe people who aren't necessarily your immediate family. And how important it is to spend time with them and that relationships matter. It's going to be an ongoing theme on this channel is that relationships matter. And for me, learning a language, like at its core, like is relational. So if I could impart the tedious bit of challenge for you viewers, it would be to fall in love with the story of that language, right? I'm sure the story of the language or the culture behind it is probably what has driven you to want to learn a language, right? And a lot of my heart and goal with this video and many of the videos that I create on this channel is to motivate you, inspire you, and encourage you because language learning can be difficult, right? But again, my challenge is to fall in love even more with that story. What can you learn from these people, these cultures? There's so much that we can glean or put onto ourselves. And when things do get difficult, remind yourself of what you do love about the culture, and that will be a phenomenal motivation moving forward. So down in the comments, go ahead and share a bit of your story. What languages are you learning? Why do you want to learn a language? What's the stories that you're learning as you learn a language? And with that, I'll see you in the next one. As always, like and follow for language.
Ciao!